Fee, it is so wonderful to see you, Fiorella Isabel. You have been doing amazing work, and I've been catching some of the Convo Couch's conversation. I've also been catching you with kind of a new project that you've been doing where you have your own channel, and Reef, our producer, will make sure and have that link down below us. But you've been traveling and boots on the ground journalism, which is what I've always loved you for. Could you talk a little bit about your latest adventures?
Yeah, so thank you for having me on. And I just got back from the occupied West Bank and I visited several areas of occupied Palestine, which is ruled and controlled by the Zionist entity. And so the idea of an occupied territory basically means that Palestinians reside there. They have been there for a long time, but their freedom, their movement, their water, their electricity is controlled by Israel. And so that is the definition essentially of apartheid. You're living a second class status as a person. And while the entire world has understandably been focused on Gaza with the massive attacks on the people there, 33,000 plus people, which I think obviously the numbers are much higher. But we have seen all of us on our computers, on our phones, all over the news, what Israel has done to Gaza and what has been described by the entire world now as a genocide. And so the West Bank has received very little attention. And so I wanted to go there because the West Bank is full of Palestinians, and Hamas doesn't actually reside in the West Bank. And so when you go there, and it's very difficult to go there, and it was the first time I went, and I intend on going back if I can. You have to go through either Tel Aviv or Jordan, and all of these points are controlled by Israel. And so you have to make sure you have the security in your laptops and your phones to be able to go through. You are asked where you're going to visit. If you say anywhere near the occupied Palestinian territories, you're going to be questioned further. So they want people going there to Tel Aviv, to Jerusalem. Why? Because these are areas where Palestinians can't go to unless they have an Israeli passport. And so from the moment you walk into the airport and you land, you see the images of the hostages, the Israeli hostages that were taken on October 7th with the slogan, bring them home. And in that slogan, of course, they talk about the hostages that were taken by Hamas and how that's been, their number one call and their priority. And this is the reason they're doing what they're doing to Gaza. But when I came there, what I felt was this negativity, this energy that was just very dark.
Really?
And it was just extremely telling that Israel was trying to hide uh, the occupied territories from tourists because you see Tel Aviv full of luxurious hotels, beachfront property, and then you see, of course, Ramallah, which is where I went mainly, Albiri and Jenin, where people are living their lives, but again, the buildings are a little more dated. There is clearly a battle going on, and there is aggression by the Israeli forces. Now, one thing I want to mention, make sure to mention, is that Israel controls the movement of Palestinians from city to city, meaning that if you are in Ramallah, where
Mhm.
I stayed, and you want to go to Jenin, which is where Shireen Abu Akleh was killed 2 years ago, you need to make sure you have the correct pass and you need to pass a checkpoint. Once you pass a checkpoint, then it's okay. So what ends up happening is that the roads that are fastest in between cities have been closed down by Israel and have been entirely blocked to make it so they have to go the long route. And if you're working in one different city than the one you live in, or you have to go for whatever reason, this makes
Right.
it extremely difficult and extremely long. So that's what I experienced from going from one city to another because I was with Palestinians traveling in their mechanism of travel, which is like a mini bus. And I went from Ramallah to Jenin, and that took like a total of like more than 5 hours of travel there and back because of the
Wow.
checkpoint. And yeah, we waited a long time for some of that. And
Because those are, and for people that are listening, those are fairly close together. I mean,
yeah,
it should take like 30 minutes, 40 minutes.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Yeah, it should take very little time, but it just takes a while. And like again, they shut down roads, so they have to go in different ways. It'd be like them shutting down the highway, major highways in the US, and you have to go through the streets. That's how ridiculous it is. And so that's controlled by Israel.
Yeah.
I also saw the expansion of the settlers, meaning the expansion of the building of their homes on Palestinian land, growing over their olive trees, which Palestinians are famous for. And you see the two contrasting ways of life, the Palestinian way of life with the farmland and
Yeah.
just in essence with nature, and the Israelis building like these high-rise type of structures that are very
Western.
superficial and focused on money and all that stuff. So it's just very telling, and it just shows apartheid existence. But in spite of all of that, people are happy that they're not Gaza, and they feel for Gaza, and they're united in Gaza, and they have just been very present with everything that's happening there. We also, I spoke to some Gazan refugees who came from there and who are thankful to be there for now. But in the back of people's mind, it's always like this could happen to us. And it
Mhm.
is very clear that they are living in apartheid state, in apartheid society. And during Ramadan, which is when I was there was a lot of people shopping in the streets and doing all the normal things you would do as a family. But there are also at night battles between the resistance factions that are not Hamas and, of course, the Israelis, and that's when most of the action happens at night. And
I see. Okay.
I did get to interview a few people, and I have one on my Twitter, a mother that lost her son. Well, I have a mother that lost her son that will be up in the next few days, and then a mother that lost her son to the Israeli prison system, who
Mhm.
had been there for 5 years. He was shot 10, 11 times,
Oh
and
my
he
goodness.
became a paraplegic. And so she talked about, why they do what they do, how her son came back, and she was just very, very emotional about the whole thing. And in spite of everything, they're very resilient people. And it was great to talk to them and see the different opinions as to everything that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, Arif is putting up and for our audience so they can see that tweet and link to it and watch that. I know that you did some interviews while you were there, and I think I wanted to I had written down a question that someone had asked when they heard about your traveling. When you, because you were taking footage and interviews, when you left the West Bank, did you encounter anyone challenging you about the footage you took, or did you feel safe? What were your feelings while you were there? I mean, as safe as you could in a conflict zone, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, did you feel like you could get your honest reporting out safely, or did you feel like there was a chance they might take it?
Oh no, there's definitely like you're being surveilled. I mean, I think it's Israel has extensive surveillance on all the people, but
No problem.
especially in the occupied territories as well. So there is surveillance. You have to be very careful, upload everything to different mediums, upload everything to the cloud, all these things that I did. And when leaving Israel, you are most certainly questioned where you were. I was questioned more when leaving Israel actually than when entering, which is might be surprising for some, but they don't want you to leave with a negative view of Israel. And so they asked me who I was with, why did I go there? They didn't like that I went to Ramallah. They didn't like that because I didn't lie on that note because I had stayed there. They want, usually you want proof of where you stayed, of the hotel you stayed at. You'll also go into it with that as well. And yeah, extensive questioning as to why you were there and what you were doing. I went as a tourist. I did not want to risk getting denied a journalist visa because chances are that would happen.
Yeah.
And so if you can definitely try, but Israel has been very clear about keeping away any journalists unless they're going to say something great about Israel, right? And so if we're going to report something truthful, I think you might want to steer away from that unless you want to take your chances. But yeah, so definitely, there's definitely a sense of being watched and surveilled. And and all of that. It's not a positive sense all over these territories. I felt more safe in Ramallah, but still, there's definitely, you see the IDF with guns, you know, with at these checkpoints and watching and surveilling over the area. And another thing you see is the Palestinian Authority, especially in Ramallah. They're very prevalent there. And Al Bieri, which is a town right next to Ramallah, they're like twin cities. And basically, the Palestinian Authority, for those of you who don't know, is pretty much mocked by the entirety of the Palestinians. There wasn't a single Palestinian that I spoke to, even though some had different variations of radical to more, you know, not neutral, but less radical
Right.
in terms of politics. They all disliked the Palestinian Authority. Why? Well, because they do the bidding of Israel. They are basically under Israeli jurisdiction, so
Yeah.
they have no authority. And so they're not liked very much.
And so on that note, did you have trouble when you were talking to people just that, you know, you didn't know, Palestinians, or trying to get to some truth? Were people frightened to talk to you or to be interviewed or to be on camera? Or did you have to, or, you know, was it kind of spontaneous and you were able to get some of that footage?
No, it has to be set up. I mean,
Okay.
it's very hard to just come up to people and ask questions. One, I don't know Arabic, beautiful language, but I know very few words. Two, there is a lot of like persecution. For people might lose a lot if they say the wrong thing. So there are certain people that did want to remain anonymous and that wanted not even like video, nothing. They wanted to just speak to me. And there were people that were willing to go in their faces and give their names because they don't care and they're willing to just do that and be a part of the resistance. So yeah, it varied, but you can't just go about and you know push a camera in front of people. I think
It's not the same as like
there's
in Moscow where you see people walking up and saying, "Hey, what do you think of Americans? And what do you think of, you know," where they're just
yeah, no.
on camera and say whatever they want.
No, but they're very kind. I mean, I think Palestinians are probably some of the kindest, most resilient
Sure, yeah.
people, being able to laugh under the circumstances, being able to make jokes, being able to continue their lives in a way that I don't think many of us in the West would be able to, and having the energy to do that in spite of losing so many family members, losing people, their sons or daughters, you know, their mothers or fathers, all of this. It was very telling the kind of culture it is where they find positivity and light and all the things, and they look at martyrdom as something positive, in spite of the fact that somebody may have died. They remember them in this way. And that's something, again, that's difficult for us to wrap our head around. And yeah, I mean, I think people were very friendly. A lot of them spoke English, actually. It surprised me more
Mm-hmm.
that people were willing to speak English than in some parts of Russia, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And they were just, yeah, that I got around well, and it was Ramadan. So the whole eating thing was difficult because they weren't eating, they were
Oh,
only eating certain hours. So
so you were
I,
fasting as well.
yeah, I was fasting as well. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, there were days when I was like, oh, I have to eat his hummus, but you know, the
Yeah.
hummus was delicious, by the way. But
Yeah.
yeah, they were just very nice, very willing to help out, and you know, and again, there's a certain sense of normalcy, but behind all that, of course, is the understanding that they are very much in a fight for their lives.
Well, okay. And on that, I was just today, what is just coming out, because, and let's go backwards a little bit here with the timeline, a week or so, the horrific strike that Israel did in Iran when they took out the embassy and killed many people in Syria. And then you had, so you have, Israel has been bombing other countries besides the Gaza Strip. And most of our audience knows that. And of course, the huge amount of casualties of women and children. They've just discovered another mass grave site yesterday near one of the hospitals that's being uncovered. So this happened, and then I ran, and then you'll notice, you know, and you and I had an offline discussion about this, how the headlines were reflecting as if Iran struck Israel, like it was all of a sudden. And to
Mhm.
Americans who aren't paying attention, they're not, they're not clued in. They're believing that narrative, which would actually they were responding to the strike on their own embassy in another country, and they were also, saying that okay, that's enough. But Israel, and it was a very planned strike, and it hit military target. It wasn't meant for civilians when they hit Israel. But now there's discussion. Israel, of course, was going to strike back at Iran. What just ran today, and this is what I was looking at, is low key, the US is basically saying, don't strike back to Iran. But they're kind of saying, but if you have to go, if you have to do something with Gaza, we understand. So in other words, they're basically still allowing this genocide to go on. So there's talk that this weekend that Israel is going to make another military strike somewhere, and now it's going to be maybe Iran, or it could be Gaza again. That's had a little bit of a break during this tension. What are your thoughts on that? And then we'll get into your trip to Iran, which I'm fascinated with. Could you talk a little bit about what's happening right now?
Yeah, so I think what Iran did has historically changed a lot of things, and it was the thing that was required to be done to Israel in terms of attacking military structures, strategic military structures with several missiles and being able to hit that, and the Iron Dome not being able to withstand it. It really shows us several things. One of them is that Israel isn't all it's been pumped up to be, in spite of the fact that it has billions from the United States, in spite of the fact that it has the Iron Dome.
Well,
It
not to
really,
interrupt you, but it cost that one night, it cost 1.5 billion of
yeah.
American taxpayer money to defend that Iron Dome that didn't still got rockets through. So go on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, so that in itself should say a lot, but also the significance of it for Palestinians, for Gazans. It was literally the only time Palestinians in Gaza didn't experience bombs because the Iranians were there on in the airspace, just completely going after Jerusalem, going after, Israeli areas, and people in Israel for a fraction of a small time sense a tiny, tiny portion of what Gazans and Palestinians feel every single day.
Uh-huh.
Even though, of course, the fact that Iran didn't attack civilians, they only attacked military structures, and that's important to point out. And in doing that, we also saw simultaneously Hezbollah coming in. We saw
Right.
Ansar Allah coming in. You saw the entire resistance response. So that also shows another thing, and that's unity in the resistance. It really highlighted how they're all coming together. And if you go after Iran, Iran isn't going to be alone. And Iran is obviously at the centerpiece of this. Their military is superior to any of the structures, I would say, in the region. Ansar Allah, of course, has also been attacking Israel in the same way, militarily and economically. And so you know that when Israel, I think when goes after Iran for Iran's completely justified strike on Israel, and that's just been said also by the most diplomatic agencies, including Putin, who said that was the best way to respond and the best strategy to use, which is also says a lot as well. But when Israel goes after Iran, and I think they may, you're right, perhaps go after Palestinians. But again, Iran has been going after Israel as well for Palestinians. And a lot of people go after Iran saying, they need to do more and more. But Iran has actually done a lot. And the thing people need to understand is the resistance isn't going to go inside. They're going to allow the Palestinian resistance to try to handle it. And when it comes to outside of the thousands of people that have been killed in Gaza, what has Israel accomplished in Gaza? They haven't accomplished anything. They have actually lost this war, and that's been echoed by so many in mainstream media. So Israel's objectives have failed. Israel has failed its mission. It
Mm-hmm.
hasn't defeated Hamas. It's never going to defeat Hamas. And
Right.
in any war, even a war of global scale, what would happen? Well, if Iran and Israel go to war, that's going to bring in Syria. It's going to bring in Iraq. It's going to bring in the Yemen. It's going to bring in those entities. And of course, with Iran, there's going to have to be a response by the United States, likely. and that in the United States and Israel together are going to force a response from perhaps other global powers in China
Mhm.
and Russia. And that, of course, would be a global all out world war.
That's
But
World War
again,
III.
the United States and Israel cannot keep up with China, Russia, Iran, because Russia and China are going to ally themselves with Israel, because Israel will align itself with the United States.
Well, and on that thought, this weekend something's going to happen. We know that. We don't know what. Right now there's rhetoric going back and forth between, the U.S. Politicians are basically pretending they don't want a wider regional war. And I wanted to point out, you mentioned all the countries that would get involved, and exactly that's exactly what would happen. Jordan, of course, lining up with Israel and the U.S. because they've basically gone, they're basically like vassals.
Yeah, the king is half British.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was raised in Britain. Yeah. And then you have, of course, the fact that in Israel, 30%, 35% actually of Israelis have US passports. So you have this entanglement of economics. You have APAC that are controlling US politicians. You have Great Britain, which is also entangled in all of that too, but more so, I think, the US, because Mossad, I've been told this by, and if working in the back east, and this was years ago, Mossad and CIA are practically one. They're entangled, but Mossad is one of the greatest, is probably more sophisticated intelligence agency than CIA and MI6 and MI5. But there's hard to distinguish the difference between CIA and Mossad, right? They have different programs, but some are very embedded with each other and funded by each other. And this goes back to 1.2, that $6 trillion is missing from the defense budget. The Pentagon can't find it. Billions from Ukraine is missing that they sent. So there's a lot going on. And my theory, Fee, and you may or may not agree with this, is that the US wants the wider regional war. They're trying to dump Ukraine right now because they've lost, and they want this wider regional war because they want those gas and oil reserves off the coast of Gaza inland, but they also just want the control, and they want the nuclear control. And they want to try to weaken, this is the misguided thoughts of that foreign policy of Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, and Tony Blinken and all of them. Hey, let's try to weaken Iran so Russia can't, and they don't have a stronghold in this region. That's my theory. I could be wrong. That's other people's theories too. But what are your thoughts on that? Am I hitting the mark or no?
Well, I think there are several things possible. I mean, I do think that the United States will try to use proxies for as long as they can, because that's just what we do and what we've been doing. So if they can have Israel and have maybe some sort of NATO contingent go out there, they will do that first before they get involved. That's what we've seen with Russia, right? We've seen them use proxies in Ukraine and NATO, obviously not formally, as we are gearing towards that as well, but they have been just using proxies. I think they're going to try to do some sort of false flag scenario where it would give them the impetus to attack Iran, and do so in a very just in a way that looks, they can make it look like they need to. And we have seen this before, obviously. That's why I think it's their go-to. I think that they will find a way to go to war with Iran,
Do you agree
because
with me that they want the wider? They're saying verbally they don't want a wider
oh, of
war,
course,
but they want the wider regional war.
I feel like that's a given though, right? Like I feel
Yeah,
like right now they're saying they don't want to get involved because it's Joe Biden,
yeah,
and the Democrats are looking at the election and they clearly don't want
yeah.
a this negative attention, because Biden's popularity is like down the toilet. There's literally Biden is so unpopular, it's not even funny. Donald Trump is just running circles around him in terms of
Did you
popularity, in
did you
terms of
hear what
making
he said
sense.
today? Did you hear that this just broke that he basically told a story that his uncle was eaten by cannibals, and he, like, literally, he was at a presser and like telling the story. That was, obviously he's having sundowners or dementia of some kind, and he went off that his uncle, something Bazo or something, was eaten by cannibals and lost in New Guinea. And yeah, so I mean, and he has the nuclear codes. And here we are gearing up for this wider regional road. So people have been asking me in Russia and other, places, other international people have been saying, who's really running the country, do you think? And, my opinion, I think it's Obama folks. I don't know what yours is, but
I think it's the national security state military apparatus. So I think it's like elements in the Pentagon, like Tony Blinken, the State Department spooks. All these people are the ones running. I don't think it's one single person. I do think people like Obama are definitely involved as well, because the Biden administration, specifically this time around,
from
was a
Obama.
continuation. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah. So okay, so you're coming up on a weekend. Obviously, there's tensions building. You've been to Iran, and one of the things I get followed by a lot of MAGA accounts. In fact, I know I have an audience members that are watching this, and one of the things that I've been posting over and over, not the American First people, but the MAGA, some of the MAGA, the Rhino kind of followers or the Republicans that follow me, keep saying, oh, well, it's okay to go to war with Iran. It's okay to defend Israel. And they seem to be doing Joe Biden's work for him, like Mike Johnson, the speaker. I feel like they're literally like attaching the package of Ukraine funding to Israel to get it through with the Republicans. And so they can give, millions more aid, billions actually more aid. And you're watching this happen, and it's like, so it's that uniparty that everyone's been talking about. And I don't really think people have all these stereotypes of Iran. And I just wanted you, because you've been there, so you can talk firsthand about what the people are like, about what your impressions were like. So could you kind of educate the audience a little bit about your recent trip and why you went and what your thoughts are?
yeah, so I was in Iran last year, and it was a really eye-opening trip because obviously Iran is viewed negatively by the US, and all we hear uh, about Iran is negative. More than Russia, more than I think most countries.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I even have a hard time with people that are like finally understanding the Russia situation,
Yeah.
understanding that Iran is not what they think it is. And even no matter how much I tell them like, no, it's not like this, the propaganda against Iran is probably the worst propaganda I have ever witnessed in terms of how they're viewed. And that's one of the reasons I went there, was to kind of help out with stopping that propaganda, basically. Because when I went there, yes, obviously it's a religious country, a country that is religious mainly because of the actions of the United States a few decades ago. So that's also part of it. People
Right.
became more anti-Western, and in that anti-Western revolution that happened, there was this whole revolutionary movement that was very socialist. It was very much based on being anti-capitalist, actually. And
Mm-hmm.
so in Iran, you see that. You see that is a very anti-capitalist country. You see that is a country that is the majority of the government controls a lot of the structures, like the gasoline and gas and oil and that sort of thing. And you see that people are very religious, but it is extremely interesting to see how that plays into their life. One of the main things, of course, against Iran is the whole feminist idea that they are not free and the women are completely subservient. While
Mm-hmm.
that is true of, say, Saudi Arabia, in Iran, I actually saw more women being elevated, including myself, to a level I have never experienced in any country, not just in the West, but in any country. I felt, and I said this maybe the other day, I think, in an interview I did with Caleb Maupin, I felt the most elevated that I was there in any other country. I
Really?
was listened to, I felt heard, I felt like I was important. I haven't felt that anywhere, including Russia. And I just felt like there was this element of understanding that we were important people as women, and we had a role to fulfill. And the role was in shaping the minds of the future and shaping the minds of society, that we were the foundation. And people sat down and heard us and really just delegated to us of how we should say. So sure, women wear hijabs or headscarves. It's not even, you don't have to wear a hijab. It's a headscarf, which is smaller, and that's what is the customary thing to do. But in restaurants and in certain areas I saw of the airport, I also saw women not having it on, and it was okay. I mean, I didn't see someone come bashing the head of a woman. So in multiple cities too, because I was in different cities. And so that was something that wasn't true. And sure, there are gender roles, right? Men have different roles, but it's not in terms of inequality. It's just terms in what you're better at and what you're good at and what suits you and what you want to do. There were so many scientists, doctors, philosophers, women with multiple degrees. I mean, it was astounding.
When you were talking to the women that were, that are from Iran, that are Muslim, I think one of the stereotypes, well, there's a lot, as you know, but like one of them is Americans don't really understand the martyr philosophy.
Yeah.
And we can maybe you can touch on it a bit. But could you talk a little bit about how it is from the Iranian women's perspective? Because you were on a panel, is that correct? And you discussed different things professionally. What was your impression talking to them over dinner, talking to them over breakfast, like, at those panels, publicly, privately? How did they feel about their own country and the way they were living?
They love their country. I mean, for the majority of the people that were from there, some of them had lived in the States and come back and, just really enjoyed their country. And they were very happy with their lives and how they were living them. The only issue they had was how the rest of the world perceived them. And so that was what they highlighted, like how strong the propaganda is. And, they were like, look, like we go to school, we're very educated. Iran has one of the highest percentages of college educated women. These are realities and facts that people don't
So
know.
most people think that women aren't allowed to go to school, aren't allowed to read, and that's some of the myths. Okay, so that's
Yeah, that's Saudi Arabia, though. That's
yeah,
the US ally. So if
yeah.
the US really cared about women,
Yep.
they wouldn't be aligning themselves with Saudi Arabia. And again, like that's the
Good point,
behavior you
Steve.
see there.
Yeah, go on a little bit with that. So it has nothing to do with Muslim religion, right? It has to do with um.
World and how secure they.
Keep going. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was just it. So I'm just gonna go to look at the elections and see how they are, and we get to show our audience why they are looked on as some of the best elections in the entire world. And yeah, so hopefully national sovereignty will win, whatever that may be, whoever people choose. And so I'm hoping for a good outcome for these countries that are always on the eye of the empire.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, and the Mexican precedent has been pretty critical of the Biden administration. So you see the West really trying to push through, trying to push their agenda and trying to get their candidates. And then you see with Argentina, which in my eyes, knowing a little bit about Argentine politics just from friends that I've had that have lived there for over the decades, they've had, ups and downs. They've had like such, it seems like they really go back and forth between extremes and are often very much Western influence. And then their currency is usually trashed by the West. And, they go through all what they're going through. So again, you have someone who claims to be a libertarian, but yet he's very much, in my mind, he's a dictator and totalitarian. And, and he's very much like involved with Israel and things like that, and funds from the United States. So, again, it's funny how United States just thinks of every country as their proxy, like Argentina, for instance.
Yeah, and this guy is no different. This guy is as establishment as much of a wet puppet as it gets. He wants to really give all the power to the IMF. And the reason why the former candidate and former presidential candidate, Christina Kirchner, was thrown in jail with false corruption charges because she actually went after the IMF and she didn't want Argentina to be dependent on the IMF. And she was popular, and she was thrown in jail. We have seen this type of behavior from the establishment done to many presidents in Latin America. We've seen it done to Lula. We've also seen it done to Imran Khan in Pakistan. And that shows you that when an ability, as the United States has admitted their interest in it. I mean, Imran Khan called them out himself. When there is an ability for the West to impose itself on the outcome of elections, as we've seen, they will do it and they will take it and they will use proxies or whatever is needed to bring about that outcome. Why nations like Venezuela, which are resistant to it, Cuba, and others are so important in supporting, because they are really a resistance in this area of the world, where they are showing that no matter what, you're not going to give in the right of you and your people to make your own decisions. And that's all they want. All they want is to make their own decisions and not be told what to do by exteriors.
Exactly. They just want to have an independent sovereign nation, which is their right. And I think that's, goes without saying, right? So, Fee, I really appreciate all your time. And for those that want to find your work, where can they find it? And your new YouTube channel. I know that Reef will be putting that. It's going to be in the comments. So if people that look at links below, you can see it there. But could you also talk to our audience and tell them where they can find you, our fam, so to speak?
Right. So they can find me on Twitter, mostly Fiorella Isabel M is my handle. Telegram, Fiorella in Moscow as well. And so you can find me on Facebook, but I don't go on there that often. And I'm on YouTube and Rumble both as Fiorella Isabel. So you can find me there. And I put most of my work on all of these platforms, as most of them. So,
and of course,
thank you.
The diehard Convo Couch people can find you with our friends, and right, you're still doing Convo Couch at times. And
yeah. Usually like once a week, but we've both been traveling a lot. So yeah, you can always find me there on YouTube, Rumble, and Rockfin, the Convo Couch.
All right, well, good. And then I know you, of course, because sometimes you can find you on RT even though for our audience, a lot of our shared audience that tries to watch RT, I know on Odyssey and Rumble, so they can find them there. But hey, thanks, Fee, again. Your insights into Iran and just what's happening in the Middle East right now and what's happening with Gaza. I really appreciate it. So we'll continue supporting your work here. I know Indy does, and it's always, we always try to share you on INN. And so thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining us. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I know there'll be a couple glitches here, but that's what happens sometimes. But thanks for rolling through it with us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.